It's so much easier when you're aligned. It's so much easier when the CEO is an advocate of what the marketing team is doing. Manny, let's start with you real quick. Like, where has marketing fit in the outreach story? Because you have a heavy sales story, but I want to hear, like, from the beginning, where has marketing fit in this $1 billion puzzle that you've now built?
That's a great question, Dave. The marketing has been a learning journey for me and for the rest of the company, because you sort of start with a everybody knows a little bit about marketing, so everybody has an opinion, right? And then you have to weigh in with the opinion, and you have and you, as a leader, you're trying to figure out how to distill all this chatter that is happening in the company about what we should do about marketing, and then try to come up with some kind of synthesis and move forward while being inclusive. Guess what? That doesn't work. That is not real marketing. That is just you not knowing what you're doing. So we stumbled through a couple of I think we did a really good job defining the category engagement when we just came out. But then we sort of dropped the ball and sort of like continuing the category journey of like enhancing our position within the category. And now we hire a marketer that comes with a really heavy bag in category creation and definition and being different versus being better. And that's sort of like what made me realize that, marketing is about, creating your statement in such a way that is memorable, that is different, that has a position in the market, that has a reason to be, that has a purpose, that get your customers and your people, your employees excited about it. So there's no such thing as just marketing to customers. There's just one voice, one point of view, one message that everybody has to get behind. And it's really hard to do. This is why, some people, this is why there's so much turnover in B2B marketing. And I think that from a CEO perspective, it's still what Gil was getting at right before you joined. So, you need a CEO that is willing to learn, that is willing to, bring in somebody different and willing to back him up, and willing to sort of like stick out for what is that the category needs. And that has been our journey and throughout this whole thing. And you're right, the majority of our demand gen has been cold outbound SDR, because that's what we do, right? We sell SDR. We used to sell SDR tools. Now we sell this larger engagement and intelligence tool. But that has sort of made up for a little bit of the stumblings in marketing as I learned what great marketing is like. Now we're
DC, from your perspective, you're a CEO who kind of has always been obsessed with marketing from the beginning, even like pre-Drift. Can you share like why you wanted to make such a bet with marketing at Drift? Because you had such a unique perspective on this coming in, and that you knew you wanted to build a brand and bet on that. I'd love to get that story out for people to hear on this panel.
Sure, happy to. I think my obsession with marketing came from a couple of things. One, like Manny was saying, and I know Manny was an engineer and product person long before founding and leading outreach, and I was the same. I was an engineer and product person, therefore I knew nothing about marketing. I had built tools for marketers at HubSpot, Performa, other companies like that, but I wasn't a marketer myself, and so I did have a level of empathy for it, but I knew nothing about it. And when we started Drift and we were thinking about starting Drift, I had one thought, which is that the SaaS world and the world that we all kind of work in was kind of super saturated, like oversaturated, and I was wondering how we would stand out. And so I started to explore marketing and think about this idea of can we start a brand? Can we learn from those companies before us, not in technology, and really learn how to build a brand? And the more that I started to geek out on that, the more that I started to geek out on how people make decisions. Again, I'm an engineer. I'm trying to do reverse engineer why things work. And so I was like, oh, this is why people make decisions, good or bad. And, we all have these biases and all that kind of stuff. That laddered up into really respecting and understanding and becoming obsessed with marketing. But I'm not a marketer, though I'd say most people at this point think I'm more a marketer than an engineer. That's for sure.
Is Manny, you gonna take a slap shot right now, or what's going on?
I carry this around just so that I can transfer energy somewhere, because otherwise I will be jumping off the wall. It's too much.
That's awesome.
Gil, where do you think where do you fit in this puzzle? Because obviously, I think metadata is on the part of this scale now. Where David and Manny have been. How do you see marketing as an actual revenue driver today? I think that's the one trend that is happening across marketing right now. Is like a lot of people are talking about category creation and brand building and everything, but at the end of the day, whether it's Gil, David, or Manny, if you and I are meeting and we're not hitting the revenue goal, you can take all the cool brand stuff and throw that away, because at the end of the day, at least in my experience, a CEO cares about two things when it comes to marketing: pipeline and the story.
That's right. Just before you hopped on, when Jason thought he's going to moderate, he asked me, how do you do being a former marketer and then me, meaning Jason, being here, and how do you kind of balance your opinion and what you want with letting me do my thing? And it was easy because although I have, 8 years max as a marketer, I'm an engineer just like David. I figured out a way to engineer my marketing career, which was very great. That's kind of what led to Metadata. But by no means I'm not a marketer, not like a Don Draper kind of marketer. I don't come up with creative and copy and this sort of stuff. So when Jason pinged me, it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, and said, hey, we're about to become a customer, cool product. I'm actually interested in working with you. And I was like, hell, this is great. This is like a 10x better marketer than I will be. So hell yeah, I want to bring those people in. It's so easy not to tell him what to do because I have no idea what to do. He knows what to do and he's good at it. And so I think that would be my answer to him. And to you, I think you're right. The revenue is in the pipeline is what gives you the ability to try out new things. So as long you got that, when Jason has the goal, the trajectory being met every month, or even if it's not 100% there, if it's 50% or 70%, after doing it consistently for a year and a half, I have the trust that revenue and pipeline are coming in. And so now we have the kind of mind space to think about brand, to think about storytelling, and hopefully do as good of a job as David Cancel and Manny Medina did here.
Okay, there's a bunch of questions about this, and I was going to ask you guys, and we'll go there anyway. But shout out to Brian. Brian says, "What are the indicators to know if your CEO understands marketing and what effective marketing is?" DC, why don't you go first, and then we'll go to Manny and Gil. How do you want to be managed? Give me the real on this. As the CEO, how do you want to be managed up? Because I think so much of the job in marketing is getting on the same page with the CEO. And so I think this is a great question. It's kind of repeated here a couple times, but to the future marketing leaders out there, or maybe current marketing leaders, how do you want us to work with you?
I mean, the ideal for me is that for the CMO or the head of marketing to really, first for me to understand the way that person thinks, which is specific to my personality. I have to understand how they think, how they make decisions. Doesn't mean that I agree with them. It's okay, I could totally disagree with them, but they have a logical framework that they're using for how they make decisions, so I can understand where they're coming from. That lets me, if that's true, then it lets me have a large level of trust and skip through all the details. I don't need to be involved in the details. But so that's number one. Two, you need to have a certain level of respect for their approach from a creative standpoint, and that they're representing the brand well, and that they're always leveling up the brand, always willing to put in that extra 5%, 10% to kind of elevate the brand and move us into a different part of the conversation. And then if we share the same kind of vision and aspirational dream for the company, I think we're aligned. I think on KPIs and metrics, I think those are super important, but for me, it has to do more with trusting them on the creative side and knowing that we're aligned from a vision standpoint. And so that allows me to sleep at night. But I don't know if that DG has.
I think.
You can tell me if it's true.
No, I think the reason I asked is that, and we'll go to Manny in a sec, is I think that one thing you do that I'm going to share for other people that is effective. It's not a personal thing, so I can share it. But one thing that you do is whenever we would make decisions, you would have a sense of guardrails, meaning you have an opinion on how you want something to be executed. For example, we want to do an event. Okay, you're not just like, hey, here's a free pass, go do the event. You're like, we want to do the event. And I remember you and me are on a whiteboard, and it's like, okay, well, I want this many people. I want it to feel at least like this. I want it to go at least this way. And like, I think, you know, a lot of marketers work for CEOs who don't have strong opinions on marketing. I think you kind of have this approach where like you lay out the fundamentals first. Like, here are the principles, here are the guardrails for how I want us to go then make decisions.
I think that is the most important thing, in my opinion. I think, you know, often fellow CEOs will zero in on what do they want from an output standpoint. So, okay, here are the metrics I want to move. This is the dollars that I want to associate. That's super important, right? That's why we're all in business. We're not, that is the reason to be in business, to serve customers, and then to have a revenue come out the other side. But like, for me, I think you can shortcut a lot of the micromanaging and getting in the details if you just have guardrails of like you mentioned, like, this is the size we should aspire to. This is the quality level that we should aspire to. And so that helps people, and I'm a visual person, so like that helps people form a mental picture of like where you're going. It's almost like a storyboard or like a vision board. Like, this is where we're going to go, and this is literally what it looks like, what it feels like. And then they are the experts that kind of can fill in how to go from there.
Manny, do you do this for like big marketing decisions? Are you in there like kind of going through principles and things at that level?
So I think there's a big difference between empowerment and acquiescence. I think that I'm a big fan of empowerment and sort of communicating, you know, the general's intent and what are the things that are non-negotiable, and then I let the team rip. So you have to be able to work from the outcome back, right? So we're all here driving revenue, driving pipeline. That pipeline has to be high quality. So whatever we do has to sort of roll up to that. And the most important thing for me is that whatever we do has to hit a legendary bar, not a great bar, not a good bar, effing legendary. I don't know if I can curse here, but really like it's beyond
You can curse.
memorable, right? If it's not fucking legendary, then it's not worth doing. So if we're doing an event, what's a comparison group? Our comparison group is not the other B2B shows. My comparison group is Tony Robbins. Right? If I'm not killing it at the level of, you know, unleash your power within, then we fucked up and we have to go back to the drawing board. So whatever it is that we're doing has to hit that legendary bar. Otherwise, you know, what are we doing? What are we doing?
Gil, what do you think about that?
I love it when Manny curses. You know, it's funny because I'm thinking about this event, you know, and it's not the first time that with Jason, I maybe wanted something, but in my head, I didn't want something, I didn't envision something so big. I just asked for something. And then Jason came back to me with something that is about 5 to 10x what I was planning. You know, he set up his own goal to be significantly higher than if I was to set up his kind of agenda or foundation would be smaller. And so more than once, I'm experiencing that actually letting go, kind of asking the general, you know, vision, general goal, letting it go. When it comes back, if it doesn't, it doesn't stand to par with what you want, then you can modify it. But I think sometimes it might come significantly better than if I was to set it up. For the mere reason, I think that for the mere reason that when you give people ownership, and I mean full ownership, like you own this from start to finish, this is your baby, your success, then people make it huge because people are big and they're motivated. And if I set up my own tone too much, where I start taking kind of ownership, then they become the executioners and the people who are making it happen, but not necessarily the people who own it.
I think
so that's my
I think it's
opinion.
I think it's so important though to the point that you know, you guys all kind of hit on. For people out there that are like, what does it mean to work for a CEO who gets marketing? I think the way you can figure that out very quickly in the interview process or when you're talking to a CEO is like, they say things exactly like Manny said. And I know this because I've had countless number of those conversations with David, like, I'm obsessed with the way Tony Robbins does his event. It's massive. Look at what the homepage look like. Look at what the events look like. Like, if you're in a conversation with the CEO and they can't, and this is just one example, which is events, but if they can't articulate who has a good web, you know, who's got a good looking brand, who's got a good website, who has an interesting show on YouTube, who's doing something interesting. If they can't articulate any of those things, life is going to be harder. It's much easier when the CEO says, I want it like this, but I'm going to give you the keys to go and do that. And a old school Jim Rohn lesson that I learned from DC right here is when you set big goals, they work as magnets, and they might not. You might set a goal of, for example, like that first year that we did hypergrowth at Drift, we were on a plane, and David was like, we got to do an event. And I said, okay, let's get 200 people. That'd be a nice year one. And he said, fuck that. He's like, how about 1,000? And the point was not 1,000. The point was that if we've now anchored at 1,000, I'm going to go and deliver at least 650, 7, whatever it is. And that's going to, so like, I think when you set that right framework, where if you set the goal, his point was like, if you set the goal of 200, you're going to only execute at a 200 person level event, and everything's going to kind of be mediocre. Okay. We have a great question from Sam in the audience. And it's about, here, I'm going to read it. We've talked about how marketers can defend the value of unattributable actions, podcasts, organic, social. As CEO, how do you talk about justifying those actions? And I think, how do you talk about justifying those actions with board members, investors, whoever? Who wants to take that one? I think it's a great question, because I've seen it all from each of your companies. You all believe in doing things that are not supremely measurable. How do you talk about those with other people?
You put a marketer on your board.
Who's your marketer? Who's the marketer on your board?
Sue Bostrom. She was a CMO at Cisco, and one of the most incredible board members out there. Highly recommend it.
But like even more tactical than that, I mean, that's a badass way to do it. But if you think about where the team is spending their time, how do you have the conversation, like, because it's a grind, right? You got to hit the number every month, every quarter. There's something happening. How do you make how do you make it okay for the team to spend 30% of their time doing on something that's not driving pipeline?
Yeah, let me take a quick shot, and I'll pass it over to David. So I think it was you and Kyle who got into a conversation on LinkedIn that was really powerful about, you can spend money on LinkedIn ads and drive a ton of people, but it will never be better than your natural traffic, than the people who are coming to your website, coming to our events, or coming to your podcast, or coming to this thing to really learn about you. So if you don't make these things interesting, your cost of customer acquisition is just going to continue to go up, because people will forget about the ad. And guess what? The traffic that you're driving from LinkedIn is going to go away. And the only people that wins in LinkedIn ads is LinkedIn. So this is all, the hard thing about marketing is that it's hard to attribute, because it happens in the future. So you do a podcast right now, and people will remember what Gil said or what David said, and they might, they will act on it a few months later. So it's completely unattributable, but you earn a spot in somebody's head. I mean, like in the whole category creation mental model, you live somewhere now. And unless you're doing that over and over, you're always going to be paying for those LinkedIn ads. So it's something that you have to sort of fundamentally believe that happens in the future. And that's the hard thing about marketing, is that if you don't have somebody who gets that, then you're back to tactical shit on LinkedIn.
One of the things that we're experiencing here is the short and long-term goals. Like just what you said, in the short term can even be the quarter or 2 quarters. You have to continue that demand machine. You have to have I like to reverse engineer the revenue goals to pipeline to everything with stage 2 and stage 3 to make sure that we have that going so the business keeps going. But like Manny said, those ads, the traffic that you get, the organic traffic because of content and brand, converts so much better. The CAC is lower. Like everything is so economical and healthy about people that like your brand and come to your website because of that versus anything else. And so in order to make that happen, you have to invest in long-term initiatives, content that might convert a year later, or a community that might help you create a category, but there is no immediate impact. So it's still possibly measurable, but it's just not short-term measurable.
What do you say, David?
We still on the question about the board? For me, it's just like, in the early days in convincing the board in terms of how important marketing was, we did what we did internally, which is to tell stories and to tell stories about which they understood, about how saturated the market was, and that we were at a different point in the cycle, and that we needed to be able to stand out. And so that we were going to take an unconventional approach to marketing, one that was really hard to measure. And but we thought that here were the signals or the guardrails that we had, and if these things were going to pay off, they would look like this. And so we convinced some of that, and I think we had a board that was, again, this was very, very early days, even pre-product, who were very supportive of that and kind of understood it because they came from this world where they were seeing hundreds and thousands of companies emerging. And so they got that. But it was really storytelling and really applying that to, how they think about the world, their worldview. And because of that, it made sense to them to make that move.
I think that's important because I think in all of your cases, like that is embedded in the company strategy, right? Like you can't just blindly go to market. You have to go to market and understand how people find products and services like you. And they listen to others, they listen to podcasts, they read blogs, they get on email lists, they watch YouTube, they're on social media. That's how we buy. And like the point that I made in my initial post is like most companies on this session today, less than 30% of your revenue is probably coming from paid marketing, right? And so that's not necessarily a negative thing. It just means like, why don't we spend so much time talking about the other 70%?
Yeah. One of the things that is important to remember is that for all the new, so we're all here in some kind of new category, right? Like we took something that was in the past and we're creating something new. Our main holdup for growth, our main growth limiter is education of the market. All our TAMs are huge. You all got venture capital, so we all know that our TAMs are big. The addressable one that is going to show up and buy something is the one that we educated a year ago. You see what I mean? So if you're not constantly educated ahead of where your number needs to be, you're going to be screwed. It's going to show up in revenue, and that's a mental model you have to everybody has to just buy in to be in this business.
The other thing that happens, I know this is shocking for people in B2B, but people will tell you. They will tell you where they heard you from. We would joke in the early days that it was an internal joke at Drift about how are we going to justify the ROI of seeking wisdom. And then we got all these screenshots of head of marketing at some enterprise company we're trying to sell to, who's like, I love the podcast. I'm a huge fan of DC. And we'd screenshot those and send them around to the company and say that's how we're going to justify it. And I think that's the stuff. One of the most interesting insights is there's what you think happens from a direct response marketing standpoint. And then when you actually talk to the sales team, they heard you on that podcast. They heard you on that. Okay, I want to get to more of the audience questions. This one has been heavily upvoted. Do you have any advice for pivoting from a lead focused marketing approach to revenue focused and getting the C-level to buy in?
Yes, I have an easy one there. I'll mention it first, and then I definitely want to hear DC and Manny's. Comp plans. Just like salespeople, marketing people can also have in their comp plan a pipeline goal. In fact, Jason came to me and changed his own comp plan and his team's comp plan, which I thought was genius and very genuine and gutsy. And so that's how we do it. You make sure it's in the comp plan, and the goals, you can essentially limit the number of things they have to worry about in terms of their performance to those pipeline revenue goals.
Manny, DC, any follow on to that? How do you talk to the CEO about making the shift from lead focus to revenue focus?
I think that you have to sit down with your marketer. And so first of all, we're all here to make revenue. So we all have to believe that is true. I was talking to, a while ago, I was talking to Kylan, the CMO of Qualtrics. And he had this really strict standard for what qualified revenue, attributable revenue to marketing. So, it needed to happen within the quarter. It needed to be a lead that they touched sometime within the quarter, and they needed to convert within the quarter. Otherwise, it wasn't counted. So that's a very strict way of defining it, but it's a very simple way to do it. You see what I mean? So at the end of the day, what we need is some kind of simple rubric to say, look, you touch a lead within the quarter and it converts, it's yours, attributed to yours. And if you have a payment plan that is aligned to that, then you get paid for that. So when it gets messy is when we are like, oh, but I touched it, 5 years ago, and they remember me now, and that's because I converted. That's just hard. You know what I mean? So nobody gets paid for for pipeline. We all get paid for revenue. So let's align on how we're gonna work, and then let the trains run. That's the way I would do it. It's just find an easy rubric by which we all measure success.
Was that a quarter? Do you think a quarter is a good benchmark for people, or is that specific to Qualtrics?
I think that's it's just like everything else. It's arbitrary. You see what I mean? It just allows you to just get on with the conversation. I think that if you're in a very long cycle kind of purchase, then a quarter may be too short. If you're in the land and expand, then the expand is actually more important than the land sometimes. So you want to be able to attribute like the expand number and where that goes. So there's there's no silver bullet here. You have to do what you need to do. But I think that as long as you keep it simple and you'll stick to it, over time it's easy to measure and easy to commit to.
Okay, Gil, you kick this one off first. How do you explain the value for multi-touch attribution for enterprise marketing to a CEO who's focused on first touch lead source? I'll give you the caveat. If you're measuring first touch lead source for an enterprise motion, that sounds like you're setting up to fail. But go ahead, Gil.
This is the one you give me?
Yeah, because I want to hear you curse and say something interesting.
Exactly. I don't know how to react to that one. Look, I'll tell you how we both in the company as well in the attribution model that we have for the platform measure attribution, and it's very, very harsh. Similar to Manny's, it's really complicated to try to figure out the multi-touch. I agree. It's just, it's possible. Therefore, there are companies like Datorama and Infinigrow and Visible that, I think Breadcrumbs now, they do attribution. That's all they do. They can help you figure out this complicated. He came 3 months ago, but then, a week ago, he got this email and this ad, and that's exactly why they bought. It's possible. I think it's easier to attribute it to if you created a lead that wasn't there and that lead became a main decision maker in a new opportunity that didn't exist before, then for sure you can give credit. And we try to apply that model. It's simple. I can explain it in like 15 seconds, and it helps you make decisions from the right mindset. Meaning you don't continue a campaign because you've seen maybe some vanity metrics, but you continue a campaign because you know for a fact this pipeline wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that campaign.
Let me jump on that. So one of my good friends is Aaron Bird, the co-founder of Visible. He lives like right over there in West Seattle. When we were talking, when he sold the company to Marketo, and then after that he sold to Adobe, and after that he made money and just peaced out. We were hanging out in Italy after he made his money, and he's like, "Let me tell you a secret. You know that whole W attribution model was made up." So this is the kind of shit we talk about, right? About made up models doesn't really mean anything. So what you should do is just time bound the time by which you're going to attribute the lead and call it done. You know what I mean? Like we argue about this shit and a new lead. If you end up with a new lead of a company you never heard of, you got bigger problems because you need to be fixing the kind of companies you sell into. Otherwise, you don't know what you're doing. Your time is all made up. So you need to be prospecting into your patch, into the accounts that you're going to be buying, and then just get busy with that. Anyway, that's my rant.
Amen.
It is made up, and I think that's an important example. Almost back to the guardrails thing. It's like at some point you have to come to an agreement on how we're going to talk about this thing internally, stick to it, test it, go and do it, and then figure that out.
I think it's also partially our fault. Every MarTech vendor, and maybe also in sales tech, the dashboard of that always has to be. It's right. The dashboard always has to prove that whatever pipeline you got is because of that technology that is showing the dashboard. So every dashboard is different.
Yeah, that's called incentives. Incentives rule everything.
Marketers love dashboards too. Okay, here's a good one from Danny. How do you balance getting your team to drive actionable results, aka pipeline right now, while also empowering them to think outside the box and trust new ideas? This is common at a lot of teams. It's hard to do. How do you do it?
I
talk too much. I want to let David Cantor.
Yeah, you have to do both. I always have this rant, again, being an engineer, but mostly with product people and engineers. I'm like, they always want a binary answer to things. Like I can only drive revenue or be creative, but I can't do both. You have to do both. And that's why we have teams and we have specialization within teams so that we don't have to be single threaded. We could be multi-threaded, and we could have people or whole work streams happening that are focused on the creative side, and we can measure those, and we can have those on the pipeline generation and operational side. But you have to do both. And I think these are like false choices that we like to throw at people, right? And it usually is covering something else, some kind of other dysfunction or problem. But like, you have to be able to do both. You have to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time. And so that's just the world that we live in.
I completely agree. You have to, so you have to earn your way to like innovation, right? Like you have to be a reliable producer, and then you can go do experiments and you can try new stuff. But if you're not reliably producing, if you come to me and be like, "Oh, I want to try this new thing, I want to be creative," no, go and reliably produce for a little bit, and then we can try things on the edges. You know what I mean? It's like a chicken, right? If the chicken's not laying, it's soup. So like you gotta be reliably producing here.
That's my quote of the day. If the chicken doesn't lay, it's soup. I love that.
From the guy holding a hockey stick.
I know. It might be a machete. It might be a machete.
You know what I'm talking about. Everybody has
Of
chickens
course.
in the back.
Of course, I have
course.
told people the story of I used to have a rooster when I was a little kid. 5 years old, I came home one day and my dad cooked it and was eating it as soup. So that explains everything you want to know about me.
It's also, I think that question is also a little bit like misleading, because I think that, well, to kind of what Manny said, like you're going to pick and choose spots where you should not innovate. Mm-hmm. Like let's we don't need to reinvent the wheel for this. But I also think that for most things in marketing today, that's part of the job. There's so much noise and so much competition in all those channels. You have to be able to do it in a creative way. And so it's like, hello, would you like me to hit my goal creatively or not creatively? Well, like creatively, obviously, you have to be able to do both. Gil, I'm going to take one more question unless you want to comment on top of that.
I do want to comment because I think it's I like the solid, and you have to produce, and that's obviously needs to happen. The thing is, in a startup, I don't know about you guys, but for me, every year it's a whole new game, a whole new rules. And if we just do better on what we did last year, we're gonna die. I mean, the growth is gonna stall. And I find it that sometimes some people, they'll come to you and they want to do creative stuff when they don't get their shit together, and that's bad. But if a person has their shit together and they produce amazingly, sometimes they forget actually to innovate and take like 20% and just try out crazy experiments that, on their own, with their own autonomy and their own budget, just to see what exponential returns can come, because they're so accustomed to getting the shit together. So they're so solid. And I think it's our job to remind leaders or just team members of the company that, look, you should absolutely take some time and try out some things that can have potential exponential outcomes, and you may fail 9 out of the 10.
Okay, this is a question from, I'm going to take this one. What if the CEO wants to position the company in a way that they can't deliver on the promise? This is from Alexis at Metadata. I hope this is not about you, Gil. Or do we have to go to next question? All right, we just unlocked some. No.
Yeah.
Created some internal.
Let's take that offline. Let's take that offline.
No, not at all. I think that's a very interesting question. I'd love for you to answer it.
Oh my goodness. If the CEO wants to take the company in a direction that we don't agree with,
or if it's like, if you're kind of balancing like where if you're balancing what you can actually deliver on, right? Like the Teslas haven't shipped yet, but you got to sell the Teslas.
I'm probably I am the person to do this, right? As DG can probably attest. So I think, you have to, I will say for myself, and as, founders of companies, you have to get people to believe in things that they may not see a path to get there, and they might not understand how to get to build it, and they might be skeptical because like what you have now, what they've built so far, what kind of systems you have in place can't support it. But like that is the job of a leader, right? Especially as the CEO and the founder of the company, you have to get people to suspend disbelief to some degree. And so we're not talking Fire Festival here, but we're talking about like we can credibly build something that's great. And so like that's my job. And so I will constantly push people, like in DG's story about, wanting 200 people at an event. And I said, let's do 1,000. And he thought I was crazy and insane. Obviously we pulled it off, more than pulled it off. But like at the time he thought I was out of my mind and that there wasn't any way to do it. And so, but then, you take a step back and you see like there is a path to do it. I didn't say 1 million, I said 1,000. And ever since then we would build, I would push people just outside of their comfort zone to a place that I knew that we could deliver on. But even if they were skeptical, even if they thought that it was impossible, but I don't know, I kind of see it as my job. I see it as a job, especially at the stages of companies that are represented on this panel. We have to constantly do that.
I think where it gets missed, you have to believe. And so like in that case, like I believed in the vision. And so it was like, this is crazy, but like, we have to lead with story. We have to lead with vision, right? There's a difference between the CEO asking for something that you can't cash versus like, this is vision. And I think you should want to work for a CEO that has vision to pull you in that direction. Go ahead, Gil.
And pushes you to the uncomfort zone. I think that's the key. Like when I heard David say that, it felt my heart with pride, because I think that is the number one job. Like, yes, you have to lead the company, lead whatever to a certain direction or vision, but you need to empower the people who work with you beyond their own limiting thoughts. Things that they think they can only achieve X. You're like, no, I know you can achieve Y. Go for Y.
Cool. All right, guys, this was great. I'm not going to go to one more question because it'll take forever. I would say my PSA would be go follow David, Gil, and Manny on LinkedIn, on Twitter. As a marketer on this today, you can also start to think a little bit more like a CEO and model what other CEOs and how they're doing. Just same way you'd put yourself in your customer's shoes, try to do marketing from the lens of the CEO, and your life will get easier. And if not, maybe this is the cause for maybe on Monday, you need to have a hard conversation with your boss or your CEO about, hey, we're not aligned on this marketing strategy. Like let's spend some time getting on the same page, because it's so much easier when you're aligned. It's so much easier when the CEO is an advocate of what the marketing team is doing. So that's my CTA. You all are awesome. I appreciate you making the time for this. I hope this was helpful for people.